it's like having an imaginary playmate as a child, but then as you grow up, you realize that the playmate was real and you were imaginary. It's sort of that way with the guru. I mean, you realize that who you thought you were that was following the guru, that was the hype in the first place. And that you're all, it just is. So Maharaji and I are buddies, lovers. I hate him because every time I try to sneak something by, there he is. And I can't even describe how much I love him.
Hi, everyone. It's Raghu Marcus, and this is Ram Dass Here and Now, and I'm truly happy to be back to introduce this podcast, an excerpt from a talk from Ram Dass, all the way back 1981 from Melbourne, Australia. I don't even think I've heard this myself, and I have heard quite a few over the years. And but before we get into just a small description of why I believe it's important, I want to talk about this fabulous thing that many of you, since you listen to the Here and Now podcast of Ram Dass, I believe would be interested in. We've developed something that is an association with Patreon, which is many artists actually get support from people who love the material and the content that they produce. And it's a great way to support. And what we're offering in return for this support is you get all of Ram Dass's podcasts without ads. And many people would appreciate that, of course. Of course, it also is the way that we can get supported to actually put all of this together. But this is an alternative. And you can also dispense with me and Jackie. You won't have to hear the intros if you want, but you still can get that. What you for sure don't have to worry about is you'll never hear another ad through the Patreon membership. So, yeah, it's plain and simple as that. And you get much more. We have all these meditations that we've called from all of the podcasts and so on. They're fabulous. A mantra. And we're going to do more stuff. We'll see what you all think about joining Patreon. So do check it out. You can go to BeHereNowNetwork.com, and there should be a nice little pop-up, perhaps. At least I hope so. But yes, so I urge you to take a look at that if you're indeed interested in just having the raw podcast. The other thing I want to shout out, we have a wonderful supporter in Magic Mind, that phenomenal elixir I've talked about before, that when my girlfriend stole the box that they sent to me and drank it all up in one fell swoop, and had to go through a whole thing so that I could try it. And it's just, the clarity that you get from this, and it's all beautiful. Each little bottle, you know, there's no muss, no fuss. And I really appreciate just the way in which it's very consciously produced. And certainly, as I just said, clarity, which is an essential thing for all of us in these weird days we're in, is an ingredient that's really supportive of our day-to-day balance. So there you go. So that's it on the announcement side. And back to this is a Q&A from a talk Ram Dass did in 1981, as I said, in Melbourne, Australia. It's called Imaginary Playmate. And that's Ram Dass's, the contextuality of what it means to him to have Neem Karoli Baba as his guru. And he's so balanced about that. And he cautions everybody, now, don't get too caught up in the concept of the guru, because there's no rules and it's not rational, right? So the other thing that I particularly liked in this Q&A is about free will, answering a question about free will. It's just the idea. It's an inquiry about being too formless and feeling disconnected from the physical. You know, when we start to experience through meditation and other mindfulness practice and chant practices, whatever, yoga, whatever it may be, and we kind of disappear a little from our bodies because it feels so good. Wow. You know, it's like when Ram Dass describes his psilocybin, that first time he took it and he saw his body sitting on the couch. He couldn't believe that he was out there in space the way that he was and had left his body. So we get a little bit attached to that and attached to the intellectual concepts of formlessness. And so this is great. He talks about being grounded and getting your act together, which we all need to be reminded of on a day-to-day basis, I would say. And within it all is the sense of responsibility, and he speaks to it especially as it pertains to social action, which is right on our day-to-day topic. Is what can we contribute to this ever-divided world? So here you go. This is it. It's called Imaginary Playmate. Ram Dass, Melbourne, Australia, on Be Here Now Network. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com and enjoy these amazing podcasts. See you later.
How do you deal with disturbances in meditation? Well, the label disturbance is the attachment to a model of meditation that makes the thing a disturbance. And the answer is to notice them. For example, if you were meditating on your breath, which might be one way of meditating, just following your breath. See, meditation means a number of things. It can mean concentration, or it can mean a deeper involvement in the universe. A meditative life is a life in which you are fully aware every moment, right? In which nothing is a distraction. It's all part of the meditation. In which you expanded to include that into the meditation, if you will. So, but whether or not something is a distraction to your meditation is a function of which particular kind of meditation you're doing. If your meditation, for example, is following your breath, and then you start to have a thought, which is an internal distraction, such as, this will never work, okay? That's a distraction. In that case, because you agreed that you were going to follow your breath, that thought is a distraction. If you get angry at the distraction, you're just juicing it up. What you do is you notice, there's that thought, and then you return very gently to following your breath again. In other words, you don't start a dialogue with a distraction. You don't make a big deal about it. You don't try to push it away or grab at it. You just notice it and then bring your awareness back to whatever your primary object of meditation is. That's in that kind of meditative practice. There are other meditative practices where each thing becomes the focus of meditation. For example, you're following your breath, and then suddenly you feel a pain in your knee, and then your knee automatically becomes your primary object of meditation, and everything else is dancing around the pain, and you just focus on the pain, and focus on the pain, and focus on the pain. See, in other words, you can't ask the question about distractions in meditation. You can only ask it relative to which particular kind of meditation you're asking about. But generally, people are talking about concentration when they're talking about meditation. And the way of deepening the concentrated mind on any primary object of meditation is when you are distracted by anything, to notice the distraction, not get angry, not go follow it, but just come back to your primary object again. Okay? Questions? Sir? I can't hear. I got, what is the relationship between concept and percept. In yoga, they're both forms of thought. They're both the same thing. I can distinguish them as a psychologist for you very easily, as you probably can as well. But that is not really functional from anything in which you start to be attached to any structural form at all starts to be the holding of the mind. And that can be at the every time it goes from sensation to perception, you can say it's the difference between perception and apperception. I mean, it's the difference between when you bring the past and everything else to bear on it, then it starts to get conceptual from percept, which is further out. But that's all psychology. From a yogic point of view, they're all the same. They're all traps. Yes.
When you sit for a minute or so with your eyes shut on the stage, what's happening for you?
When I sit with my eyes closed on the stage, what's happening to me? I'm disappearing back into it. And then, in other words, when I come to a point where I think I'm supposed to decide something, I know I must be standing in the wrong place. Since who's that? So all I have to do is just empty, and out of the emptiness will come whatever comes next. So I just go back, I just let go of wherever I'm standing. Right? And then I just empty, and then whatever comes next, comes next. About letting go. Well, it's interesting to understand that the ego, the structure that tells you who you are and how you function in the world, the game is not to destroy that by any means. The game is merely to extricate yourself from having it be your master. So it's there in a perfectly functional way, available to be used. You can't function without an ego structure. So what, in effect, letting go is merely letting go of the identification with different roles and stances. And every time you quiet down the mind or start to flow into the moment with the heart, all those things disappear. They simply disintegrate. And then you recreate them again. That's karma reasserting itself. And you get so that they keep being recreated and dissolving and recreated and dissolving. And the way in which you can release them or dissolve the mastery they have over you so they're available to you when you want them, but you don't have to be in them all. Just like you're not making your heart beat, but your heart is beating. So your ego's available, but you don't have to be busy being it every moment. You can rest behind it. How you particularly do that, only you know. You must listen in your heart to hear, because there are as many different routes as there are beings sitting in this room. Yes. What you feel fear about is because of the thought that you need what you would be letting go of to survive. And the answer to that is just sit with the fear. Don't try to override it. It's just another part of it. Go up to the edge of the fear and then sit with it. Afraid to go further. Right, we're all afraid to go further. If we weren't afraid to go further, we wouldn't be here. The thing is, you stop judging and knocking yourself for where you're not. You understand the fear is a perfect part of your process of awakening. Allow it to be, too. Right? It's not so that's what the fear is about, and then it dissolves. It's not going to be with your intellect, because the minute you come to a conclusion, if I say it's because of glup, and then you say it's glup, now I know, Now you're holding to glup, and if glup doesn't happen to be it, you're going to be frightened too. You say, I got glup, it's a glup. Who are you? I joined the glup crowd, you know. There was a gentleman who had a question, yeah. What would I say the function of them have been in my own unfolding of gurus? How do I see the relationship now? There is a great line in which Hanuman says to Ram, Hanuman is the monkey saying to Ram, who's a form of God, he says, when I don't know who I am, I serve you. When I think I am a soul, I realize I am part of you. And then I realize I am one with you. And I feel all those feelings towards my guru. Sometimes, see, like I've got this, I'll give you the short form of it. I'm looking for someone who knows. So I find someone who knows, so I grab hold as tight as I can. And no matter how much I look for him, I can't find him. I mean, I keep being with him, but I can't label him and so on. And then one day we are sitting, this is in 1972, just before I left him, and he died in 73. We were sitting across the courtyard, and he was sitting across the way, and everybody was massaging his feet and hanging around. He was throwing oranges at them and talking to them and laughing and yelling. And I was sitting across the courtyard, and I thought, do you think I did all of this lifetime just to sit and rub the feet of this old man? What a bizarre thing this is. This form is just a form. I don't care if I never see him again. And I thought, this is heresy. I love this man more than anything I've ever loved, any being I've ever loved, and I just had the thought, I don't care if I never see him again. And I'm in the ashram. I'm in the presence of God, because guru and God are one for somebody who has a guru, and I don't care if I never see him again. That's heresy. And at that moment, he turned his head. He was across the courtyard, about as far as halfway up the hall here. He turned his head, and he looked at me, and he whispered to this old man who came running across the courtyard and touched my feet. So I touched the old man's feet, and I said, Baba, why did you do that? He said, Maharaj, he said, go touch Ram Dass's feet. He and I understand each other perfectly. Okay. And what I heard him saying is, don't get hung up in that one either. And it's like in the statement in Buddhism, if you meet the Buddha, slay it. But first get the teachings, is my addition to it. Don't be afraid of getting stuck so that you don't get the teachings. Because if you're busy afraid of being stuck, all you're going to do is be stuck in being afraid of being stuck, which is just another stance. I'm not going to take any teachings because, you keep getting stuck in these different stances. So get trapped, it's okay. Maharaji, who died, he dropped his body, which was kind of a rotten thing to do. I've survived, he still survived, we still hang out together. It's like having an imaginary playmate as a child, but then as you grow up, you realize that the playmate was real and you were imaginary. It's sort of that way with the guru. I mean, you realize that who you thought you were that was following the guru, that was the hype in the first place. And that it just is. So Maharaji and I are buddies, lovers. I hate him because every time I try to sneak something by, there he is. And I can't even describe how much I love him. Muktananda, who I was here with, the only time I was in Australia ever before was 10 years ago in Melbourne with Swami Muktananda. And Swami Muktananda and I, we incredibly lovers. We love each other incredibly. He is not my guru. He's an upaguru. He is a teacher along the way, whom I honor. And one person's teacher is another person's guru, and to somebody else, all gurus and teachers are hypes. And that's all perfectly fine, because there's no single route in this game. Everybody says, you gotta have a guru. That's nonsense. You should never have a guru. That's nonsense. Stop with the rules already. People say, do you have sex? I don't have rules. Right? You may find it functional to have rules for a certain part of your sadhana. That's fine. But if your inner heart tells you this isn't right, trust your inner heart rather than the rules. Because there's nothing worse in this world than horny celibates. I'll tell you. Questions? Sir. In what sense do we have free will? That which is pure awareness is free. At the level of your separateness that you are asking that question, you are only under the illusion of having free will. But the fact is that who we are in truth is free. But freedom has no form. All forms are immediately limiting conditions. So the minute you identify with any form at all, you are no longer free. But who you are is not form. Who you are just thinks you are form. And who you are and who I am are totally free all the time. And it's extraordinary because as if we intentionally choose to get lost into form. But the question is, why did we do it? Buddha's answer is, it's none of your business. Which means that the intellectual mind can't know. You can only be the answer. You can't know the answer. Questions? You're having trouble because you're getting too formless and disconnected from the physical. Well, don't be a slob. Get your act together. I mean, you and I, see, the game is, here's what we did. We started out by wanting to get high. See, you know how to get high? I know how to get, I got some stuff. Ooh, does it get you high? And I used to have audiences that were made up of these like 15 to 22-year-old people, and they were all people who I knew because we all got high. And then there'd be this woman about 75 in the audience wearing a hat with plums and bananas on it. I think, what is she doing in this audience? I mean, it's like a Charles Adams cartoon, one of these people. And she'd come up afterwards and I'd say, did you understand? Oh, it was wonderful. I think it's great. Hello. And she'd be right there. And I'd say, how did you get so high? And she'd say, I knit. And it would blow all my models. I mean, these are all acid heads. What are you doing here, madam? Well, I knit, you know. And now I see that the whole, that how we all get high is all by all different means. Everybody's got their own route, and there's no better way or a different way. We just all have figured out, or you wouldn't be in this room at this moment. You've all figured out that you aren't who you thought you were, so to a little degree, okay? Now, so we all want to get high, and because we've been stuck so long in being who my parents thought they were somebody, so they told me who I was in relation to who they thought they were. So I grew up being somebody, and it was heavy. I mean, I was neurotic and achieving, and I had skin dermatitis and diarrhea when I was taking my doctoral exams, and I mean, I was a real good neurotic, a good American neurotic. And so when I finally break out, it's like breaking out of the smog into the blue sky. And who wants to come down? You want to get high, see? Where I can look and we're all one and we're all beautiful and we're all in love, and suddenly we come down and I'm paranoid and I don't trust you and you can hurt me and stay away and it's mine and I'm going to lock it, you know, right? And I don't want to be in that world. I want to be, I want to be out in La La Land, you see? So I get high and I learn how to get high, and we all learn and we all are high. You high, I'm high, ha ha ha. But the thing is that you can't quite drop out. Larry used to say, turn on, tune in, and drop out, but where are you going to go to? You happen to be in a human incarnation. You can go out to a spaceship, but you'll be just as neurotic out there as you were here, you know. You realize there's nowhere to go, and you finally realize that you have to honor your incarnation. That God is in form as well as formless. And where were you rushing to push away the form? Alan Watts and I were once sitting somewhat drunkenly in a Benedictine monastery late at night in his bedroom. He had snuck a bottle in, and we were having a wee drop together, and he said, "Dick, your problem," it's great, that's a good opening line. It really catches your attention. "Your problem is you're too attached to emptiness." And he was right. I was too attached to getting high, to going back into the one. And then I began to see that as long as I was pushing away anything, it had me. As long as I was putting something under the rug, I was standing on tiptoe, as the Tao says. And I became fascinated with why I came down. After all, my natural state is pure awareness. What am I coming down? What am I getting caught for? And I started to see the ways in which, quote, I was coming down as beautiful expressions of they were like fingerprints of my own karmic predicament, my own attachments. And I started to be fascinated with the things that brought me down. Because I really wanted to get free. I didn't want to just get high. Because high has in it low, and it's like another polarity. It's a yo-yo. You go up and come down, and I got tired of being a yo-yo. I did that for like 10 years. I still do it a little bit. But now I realize that the down is as much high. That's what I said. You're bored, hot, sweaty, great. This is the stuff too. Which package did you think it would come in? At first, you want to surround yourself, as Ramakrishna says, with a little fence because you feel like you're a little delicate tree, and if anybody blows too hard, you'll fall over. Somebody says, "You know all that spiritual crap is no good. Get back to reality." And your little tree goes, "Ooh, you were right, you were right, you were right, you were right." You know? And then you get strong, and somebody says that to you, and you say, "Yes, I hear that, but I've got to do what I've got to do." And, you know, I'm just think of me as psychotic. It's all right. I'll just do what I have to do. Okay? And then you're in a different space, because then you don't feel so vulnerable, and then you start to look for the things that are going to catch you. That's a far out stage. Like somebody comes to me and they say, "You live in the mountains of New Mexico. I'd like to study with you." And I said, "Well, I don't know about, I don't have students and stuff. You want to study with me?" Yes, I hate New York, but I really love New Mexico." "All right, here's your first assignment." "What?" "Go live in New York." Because if there's anything you're pushing and pulling, that's a message of where your stash is, where you're holding on. Until you can choose to live in a beautiful place like Melbourne, but if you find yourself in Los Angeles, so. You create as much beauty and happiness and pleasure and everything as you can in the world for as many beings as you can, but then the way it is the way it is. And so finally, you start to become fascinated with what brings you down, and you realize finally that you must honor your incarnation, that you took birth in order to join a school. And this is the curriculum down here, right? And as I have a friend, Emmanuel, who doesn't have a body. He speaks through a woman named Pat Rodegeist. And he says to me, "Ram Dass, you keep insisting on avoiding your curriculum. Why don't you accept the fact you're a human being? Get it together down here, too." And I've been hearing that. I've been hearing Alan Watts and Emmanuel and all kinds of beings. And so I realize I have to deal with my passions, my anger, my desires, my loneliness, my self-pity. I've got to remember my address. I've got to get a job. I've got to keep my act together, keep my clothes clean, brush my teeth, use dental floss. I got to do it all. I got to pay my taxes, change the oil in my car, And that's all part of the process until finally all of it becomes grist for the mill. All of it is the stuff you're using to get free. Because if you think you're the person flossing your teeth, you just lost it again. But if you don't floss your teeth, you lost it too. Okay? And most of the people need to get grounded. You need to get grounded. You just got to get your act together. about the word responsibility. Within the framework that you think you are somebody that has something to do, you accept responsibility to end suffering. And then you do whatever you do with whatever wisdom you have to do that. All of that is within the dream world, but within that dream, you accept responsibility. Responsibility is a word that exists only within a dream. But within that dream, it is quite real, and you accept the responsibility. I do what I can to end suffering, even though I know that suffering is just the way it is. But the way it is also includes my desire to make heaven and earth and end suffering. And I live with all of that all at once. You cannot work on yourself and see, one of the predicaments, I'll give you a good example. In India, there are now 7 million people that are blind, that are waiting for a cataract operation that is done by the mobile eye hospitals, and it takes 4 minutes and it costs $5. Okay, now, knowing that fact, what are you going to do with your next $5? Wait a second. Let me finish the image. If it were your father that were blind, you know what you'd do with it. If it were your uncle, if it were your uncle's friend, if it were even anybody that came up to you on the street. But somehow you can keep them out there and do something with your next $5 as if, well, they're them. If it was us that was blind, you know what you'd do with your $5. Now, when I get high, I look around and I see there's only one of us. When I come down, I see that there's many of us. If I want to be free, I'm going to be both high and low, which means I have to simultaneously live with the many, but as if we are all one. So what am I going to do with my next $5? I can't make believe you are them and get away with it. Over Gandhi's stone, where his ashes are, is the statement, think of the poorest person you've ever met and ask whether your next act will be of any use to that person. That does not necessarily mean, however, that you will use your next $5 for the blind people in India. Because only you know which way you must accept responsibility for the energy that is available to you, in that case, the $5. And the deeper your wisdom, the more you appreciate that your actions have to be harmonious with your unique karmic predicament. And that one person will use that $5 to buy milk for their child. Another will buy a present to make someone happy. Another will buy a holy book. Another will use it to go on a vacation. Another person will buy food. Another person, and you can't sit and judge the other person because only they know which way they must do it. I was just in Benares in India, and I was walking towards the bathing ghat at the Ganges River, and there must have been 150 lepers in a line with their begging bowls. And I came along, and they were all begging from me, and I had about 20 coins, roughly, of various denominations. And I looked at them, and I was trying to, quote, decide how to give the money away. And I found myself in this bizarre predicament of thinking, if you're missing a nose, is it worse than if you've got no hands? What a bizarre thing. How could one do that? Finally, I just gave it. intuitively, impulsively as I gave it, and then just trusted the process that I would give it well. I did the best I could under the conditions. I didn't throw it away or take it. I did what I could do, but I didn't assume that I had all-knowing wisdom about it. You and I must listen to what part we will play and which way we will serve and which way, as Bob Dylan says, you got to serve someone. You just got to serve. You just don't know which way. You got to listen or how you will take responsibility. You don't have to be a judge. You merely have to be a healer. But if you're going to be a healer, be an instrument of healing. And an instrument of healing isn't attached to whether the healing occurs one way or another. One day, Maharaji's sitting there and he's surrounded by people and he says, somebody's coming. And they say, no, nobody's coming. Yes, somebody's coming. Just then a man runs in who's the servant of one of Maharaji's old devotees. And before the servant can speak, Maharaji yells at him and says, I know your master's dying and he's calling for me. I'm not going to go. And everybody says, he's been a devotee for years, Maharaji. Go if he's dying. Nay, I'm not going to go. He said, here, give him this banana. He'll be all right. Now in India, when the guru gives a fruit, the person could be a 95-year-old woman wanting a son, and 9 months later, she'll have it. It just takes one mango. So everybody knows, it's the fruit of the guru. So they rush back and they mash it up and they jam it into the guy's mouth. And he takes the last bite and he dies. That's the whole story. All Maharaji says was he'll be all right. And to show you what the game is like a little bit more, he's sitting by the side of the road one night. They all eat by a little temple. They eat their meal at 10:30 at night. They all go to sleep. At 1 a.m, he starts yelling, I want dal and chapatis. For those of you who don't know, that's like lentil pea soup and flour and water, flatbread. And they say to him, Maharaji, you already ate. And he says, I want dal and chapatis, he's screaming, I want dal and chapatis. So in India, we would say, it's too bad about him. But in India, they say, who can understand the guru? So they wake the temple priest and he builds the fire and he makes the dal and chapatis. And at 2 o'clock, it's all ready. Maharaji eats voraciously, like he's never seen food before. The next morning at around 11 o'clock, a telegram arrives. It's read to Maharaji and it says, at 2 o'clock in the morning, so-and-so, one of his devotees on the plains, several hundred miles away, died. When the telegram's read, Maharaji said, see, that's why I wanted the dal and chapatis. But they didn't see any more than you do. But they got curious. And they kept asking him and bugging him. And after about 2 days, like he's talking to children, he says, don't you see? As he was dying, he wanted dal and chapatis, and I didn't want him to have to take another birth just for that. I'd just like you to understand what the name of the game is we're playing here. You can take it. At one point, he's walking with a friend, and he sits back, Maharaji leans back, and he starts to laugh, and the other fellow says, what are you laughing about? He says, well, so-and-so just died. And the guy says, well, if she just died, what are you laughing about? And Maharaji looked curious. He said, what would you like me to do, make believe I'm one of the puppets? It's an interesting one.
This podcast is brought to you by the Love Serve Remember Foundation and ramdas.org. We appreciate you listening, and we appreciate all the support that you've given us. Please continue that support and donate at ramdas.org. We can then continue to share what Ram Dass has been sharing for all of these years. Thank you.